Hello friends, I am Vaibhav Goel and today we will be discussing the jurisdiction of learned AOCPC while making adjustments. As an article, as a professional, you would be receiving various notices under section 143(1)(a) proposing adjustment. Now we will be testing those notices sent by the AOCPC whether these adjustments proposals are valid in law and what is the course of action we have to take. Our today's learning objective would be whether adjustments under section 143(1)(a) can be made for debatable issues, and if or whether there is a change in law post Finance Act 2016, whether the old case laws will be applicable or not, whether rectification can be made to an intimation generated under 143(1), or whether no appeal can be filed or whether it can be filed. These will be our objectives. If you like my presentation, if you like, please share, subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon. Now, we will begin with reading the section. What it says: where a return has been made under section 139, it covers all returns. That is, be it 139(1) regular returns, 139(4) belated returns, 139(5) revised returns, 139(4)(a), 4b, 4c. It covers all returns. Or in response to our notice under section 142(1), you all would be remembering 142(1), where the time limit prescribed under section 139(1) has expired, or there is an end of assessment year, and yet the assessee has not filed the return of income. So assessing officer in such circumstances can issue a notice to the assessee to file return of income. Even those returns have to be processed under 143(1). Okay. And what it says, the total income or loss shall be computed after making the following adjustment. It says only adjustment possible is what is given under this subclause. What is in the subclause A? It says only adjustment possible. AO has the power only to make those adjustments. He cannot make any other adjustment other than given under this clause A. What is the first clause? Any arithmetical error. Though it is a time of computerization, arithmetical inaccuracy is very low, because computer detects any arithmetical inaccuracy even before or the XML file is uploaded at the portal of the income tax website. Okay, so there is an inbuilt arithmetical accuracy. However, if some arithmetical inaccuracy creeps in, or the check created by the software is breached, or there is some bug in the software and the file is uploaded, the CPC at the time of processing can correct it. What will be the course of action for the assessee when the CPC identifies certain mistakes or certain inconsistencies as under clause A? We will discuss when we will discuss examples. What will be the course of action an assessee has to take? Now come clause 2i. What it says? An incorrect claim. If such incorrect claim is apparent from any information in the return. Two things are very important. That is, it should be an incorrect claim, and that incorrect claim should be apparent from the information in the return. Remember, if any inconsistency is noticed in the audit report and the income tax return, whether an adjustment can be made in this entry, the answer is no. What it says, inconsistency has to be in the return of income. But whether the AOCPC is helpless that he cannot make any adjustment, the answer is again no. Why? Because that entry will be covered under subclause 4. Okay. So earlier, before this present scheme of processing came, certain terms were used, and those terms were prima facie admissible and prima facie inadmissible, and those were not defined. And to control the controversy regarding those terms, the legislature very well defined the term incorrect claim. What can be an incorrect claim? When it is inconsistent with any other entry. For example, an SSC claiming that he is exempt under section 1020C 3C 3I AB. Remember 1023C 3I AB? Where an educational institution claims that it is substantially funded by the government. While filling schedule IE4, it gives an income. That this is my total receipts, and out of this total receipt, this much is the voluntary contribution from the government. However, while filling schedule VC, it says it gives a different figure. The figure given under schedule IE4 and the figure given under schedule VC is different. Okay, when these figures are inconsistent and the effect is such that the contribution of the government to the total receipt ratio is less than 50%, the exemption would be denied. So it would be very well covered under this first bullet. There may be other situations where, suppose it is a case of a company. It has an income from house property, it is an income from PGBP, it has an income from other sources, and it is income from capital gain. All major heads covered. Now what happens, since it is a company, all income would be routed through a P&L account. So when it would be routed through a P&L account, while filling schedule BP, the assessee has to make certain adjustment claiming that these incomes are taxable under different heads, be it house property, be it capital gain, be it other sources. Inadvertently, the assessee clubbed all the entries and wrote that this is income from other sources. However, he properly offered house property, he properly offered capital gain, he properly offered other sources. But while calculating business income in that schedule BP, he clubbed it all together instead of giving it separately, that it is of house property, it is of capital gain, other sources. And the AOCPC generates an intimation proposing that while calculating schedule BP, we will reduce the amount. Why? Because in schedule OS, other sources, you have shown only 10,000, and while calculating in schedule BP, you have shown 18 lakhs. So we will reduce the deduction from 18 lakh to 10,000 and propose an addition. So it would be very well covered under inconsistent with another entry. Now come bullet number 2. It says information required to be furnished has not been so furnished. What was the information that was required to be furnished? The information was, suppose I am a charitable trust, I am a charitable institution, I was not able to spend 85% of my total receipt. I called a board of trustees meeting. I took a resolution that I should accumulate this excess surplus for next 5 years. And there was a resolution to file a Form 10 under section 11(2) of the Income Tax Act. However, the auditor of the company, while uploading return, failed to upload within the due date Form 10. Though in the income tax return he has claimed exemption under section 11(2), which is deemed application. However, he failed to upload Form 10. So the information is inconsistent. So there would be again, the case would be covered under bullet number 2. Now under bullet number 3, where the deduction where such deduction exceeds specified statutory limit. We have specified statutory limit in the sense that for section 1023C 3I AD, 1 crore is the gross receipt limit. Under section 80D there is also a limit. Under 80C there is also a limit. There are various sections under which there is a limit of percentage. Like in 50C, there is a adjustment that you can make up to 5%. Now it is 10% of, if it is not more than 5% or 10%. So though 50C would not be covered in bullet number 3, but other 80C, there is a limit of 1,50,000 and assessee claims 2 lakh. Though there is an inbuilt feature in the XML generated, but however, sir, while generating XML, the software encountered a bug and it went up. So this would be covered under this. Or there may not have been certain facility available at the time of filing a return, but while processing the return, the income tax department got that filter and applied it. So it would be covered under bullet number 3. I have just enumerated all these examples here. Now the bullet number 3. Disallowance of loss claim if return furnished beyond due date. Now the question is, it is assessment year 1890 and I filed the return beyond the due date, and in the schedule carry forward of current year losses, I report that this is the loss that I propose to carry forward. Whether this would be disallowed under this entry or not? The answer is no. This would not be disallowed under this entry. This would be disallowed under entry number 2. Why? Because I am making an incorrect claim. What was the law? That I am not allowed to carry forward. So I will not be allowed to carry forward because I have not filed the return within the due date. However, for assessment year 1918, I filed the return in time, but I brought forward loss, and the loss arising out of return of income filed belatedly. Whether an adjustment can be made? Yes, adjustment will be made under entry 3I. Now, whether all these adjustments can be made without giving an intimation to an assessee, suo motu, just like as it was done before Finance Act 2016, or this Finance Act 2016 has brought about a substantial change. We will read one of the provisos just. Now, clause 4, what it says: an item was indicated in the audit report but was not considered in the return of income. There are various, like disallowances, 40A3 disallowances, capital expenditure disallowances, personal expenditure disallowances, disallowance under section 43B, disallowance for non-payment of TDS. All these disallowances are given under, indicated in the tax audit report, and the assessee has to give effect to those disallowances while preparing the return of it. Alright. And where they show these disallowances? Generally in schedule OY, generally, and there may be other places as well where these disallowances are given effect. But if there is a mismatch between those indicated by the auditor and that reclaimed in the return, then the AO is well within its rights to propose an adjustment. Earlier, before Finance Act 2016, no such right was available because only right was restricted to material apparent in the return, not connected with the return. The addition of this 3 to 6 says adjustments can be proposed for matters connected with the return, not only in the return, because now audit report has to be filed along with the return, though not in the physical sense along, but yet both have to be filed electronically. Now item number 5, disallowance or deduction if return is furnished beyond due date. If assessee wish to claim certain deductions under section 10AA, 80IA, 80IB, 80IAB, 80IC or 80I. Sixth point has become more or less redundant because of the proviso which says that it should not be applicable, and it is a very good move by the legislature that they are not proposing any adjustment on account of difference in form 26AS and the return. Why? Because in form 26AS the payer may have booked the expenditure upon accrual basis. I may have booked on cash basis. For somebody it is an expenditure for 18-19, for me it is an income of 19-20. For example, in case of bank audits, The provision is made on 31st March 2020, but I will conduct audit in May or June 2020. So this will accrue to me in 2021. So on account of these mismatches, it is proper that they have done away with this provision, and it is also good that keeping in mind the provisions of section 199 read with rule 37BA, they have amended the schedule TDS, wherein if a person wish to claim TDS, he has to show whether appropriate income has been offered to tax or not. If it has not been offered, then it will not be a case. It will not be a case of 143(1)(a). It will be a case of 139(9). Why? Because he has not filled in the annexures, statements and columns in the return of income properly. So it will be a case of 139(9), not a case of 143(1)(a). Alright. So for example, we will discuss the example regarding schedule TDS when we will be discussing section 139. Alright. What is the procedure? AO will issue an intimation, give you time of 30 days, an opportunity will be provided, and if you reply within 30 days, after considering that reply, he will either make the adjustment or he will drop the adjustment. There may be a situation like you have belatedly filed the return of income and you wish to claim those specified deductions under 80IA, 80IB, or you wish to carry forward your brought forward losses which is arising out of belated returns. But you have approached the Honorable Commissioner Income Tax and he has given you an order under section 119(2)(b) that the defect has been condoned and the loss is allowed. So when this has been done, can an adjustment be made? No. There may be a possibility that in the ITBA module, those orders passed by Honorable Commissioner Income Tax may not be available with the learned AOCPC. So it is a responsibility of the assessee, while giving response to those adjustment proposals, let's see, learned AO, I have got an approval, I have got a delay condoned by Honorable Commissioner, so this adjustment is no more warranted in my case. Alright. This provided also, we have read it, that the clause 6, no more adjustments can be made on account of form 26S. Now we will understand whole of this law with the examples. Very simple examples, and this will make the case in our mind very much clear. That where can adjustment be made, where it can be contested. We must be very much clear. Now the first example. KK Foundation filed a return of income in the status of AOP Trust, claiming exemption under section 1023C 3IA. While processing the return of income under section 143(1), learned AOCPC changed the status of the assessee to firm and levied tax at the maximum marginal rate. Whether learned AO has the power to change the status of the assessee from AOP Trust to firm? The answer is big no. Under which entry? It is neither an arithmetical error nor it is an incorrect claim. If the assessee feels that I have given a wrong status, he should verify my PAN. At the PAN I have shown it AOP Trust. And the system is such like that if my PAN shows AOP Trust, I cannot file a return with the status as firm. I have to select AOP Trust only while filing return of income. The XML file will not get uploaded at the income tax web portal. So this means that this is not something which is apparent from the record. If assessing officer wants to show that AOP Trust is a sham, he has to make an inquiry. He has to make a further inquiry. Whether he can make a further inquiry under 143(1)(a, the answer is big no. For making an inquiry, he has to issue notice under section 143. This has been rightly held by Honorable Allahabad High Court in the case of CIT versus KK Family Trust, 150 Taxman 439, that no adjustment can be made. and no change of status can be made while processing of return under section 143(1). Alright. And this case generally arises in the case of trusts. When they file the return under the category of AOP, trust or society, they tend to claim the benefit of basic exemption limit. However, to deny them the benefit of basic exemption limit, the CPC changes their status from AOP trust or AOP society to AOP, which is not allowed to carry on to get the benefit of basic exemption. So these controversies arise there, and now it has been settled by the Honorable Allahabad High Court that the AO cannot make such change in status. Alright. Now the major portion of my today's deliberation would be around debatable issues. Now we must know what is a debatable issue. Debatable issue is an issue where there are two views possible, and the fact that two views is possible is evident that one high court gives in the favor of revenue and the one high court gives in the favor of SSE. So on account of those debatable issues, no adjustment can be made under section 143(1). We have to be very much clear. And the decision of High Court is binding on all authorities within that state. Okay. And the another golden rule which you have to remember, the first golden rule, the rule as laid down by the Honorable High Court is binding on all authorities within that state. So can it be said it is debatable within that state? The answer is big no. It is not debatable within that state. It is debatable in a territory, in a state where there has been no judgment, neither in favor of the SSE nor against. Where a High Court has given, it is a shut case. It is no more debatable in that territory, but in other territory it is yes. So another golden rule is, suppose Honorable Supreme Court delivers a judgment in the year 2019. What happens? In the year 2019, a judgment came regarding a provision which was in existence since 1961. So whether the judgment will apply for the prospective cases or it would apply with the very inception? The answer is it would apply from the very inception, until and unless the Honorable High Court exercises its jurisdiction under Article 142. Under Article 142, the Honorable Supreme Court has the power to do justice. Whatever may be written in the law, it is not the driving force for the Honorable Supreme Court to give judgment. What would be the driving force to give judgment in under Article 142 would be to do or cause complete justice, which would be based on equity, justice and good conscience. Unless the discretionary jurisdiction exercised by Honorable High Court under Article 142, it would be applicable from the very beginning. Now, to understand these debatable issues, we will discuss with the help of an example. Suppose Mr. X is in Delhi and he sold a piece of land for rupees 60 lakhs. And we know land and building both are there, so it is the responsibility of the assessee to appropriate a value subject to 50C to land and subject to building as well. He was a businessman. He was filing his return and there was a block of asset with the building, and this was the only building, and 2 lakh was the opening WDV of that building. Now he sold that land and building for 60 lakh and the value appropriate to the building was rupees 10 lakh. Now how will the capital gain will be computed? Think of it. The capital gain will be computed as short-term capital gain because it is in the block of asset and has been claiming depreciation. So under section 50, 8 lakhs would be computed as short-term capital gain. Now to save that short-term capital gain, he invested that amount. He invested that amount under section 54 EC bonds, NHI bonds or REC bonds or any other bonds notified by the government under that section. He invested, and claimed in the return of income that no gain is taxable. So what to do? Is it an AO proposes an adjustment saying that under one schedule you have computed short-term capital gain, and under one schedule of capital gain you are claiming it as exempt under section 54 EC. So it is an incorrect claim, because section 54 EC is available only with respect of land and building. It is land and building, but it is available only to a long-term capital asset. And under section 50 you have computed long-term capital gain or short-term capital gain? No, you have computed short-term capital gain. So AO proposes this is an inconsistency and which is apparent from record. So I am proposing an adjustment. So is it right? Think whether this adjustment is right or proposal as such. The proposal is debatable. Why? Because the issue has been decided, similar issue, not the same issue, but the similar issue has been decided by the Honorable Supreme Court in the case of CIT versus VS Dempo Private Limited in the favor of the SSC. So even if the department wish to contend that it is not on the issue per se, but it is on an issue similar, so it is at the most debatable. And when it is debatable, can then adjustment be made under 143(1)? The answer is big 2. Clear? So no adjustment can be made, though there may be inherent limitations of the utility. So we cannot do anything with that. Law is as it is and the practice is as it is, as it has to be. Now as it says, I am not going to buy bonds. I will pay tax under section 112. Yes, we can pay, because in VS Dempo, Honorable Supreme Court said what is required is long-term capital asset. What section 50 only does, it only for the purpose of section 48. It treated it as a short-term capital gain, not for the purpose of the whole chapter of capital gain, only for the purpose of computation. Since the scope is restricted only to section 48 and not extend to section 45 or the complete chapter of capital gain, as he says, I am eligible for 112. Can an assessing officer, while calculating tax under section 143(1)(b), remember under 143(1)(a) we calculate income and proposes an adjustment. Under 143(1)(b) he carries out an tax. He will not give us an intimation, because no proposal or such a proviso is provided under 143(1)(b). What is provided under 143(1)(a)? Whether he can make an adjustment? The answer is no. And we get the clue from Honorable Delhi High Court decision in the case of Ichar Godar Limited 2008 to 96 ITR 125 that no adjustment can be made. Now clear? So what we have learned, even if it is debatable, no additions can be made under 143(1)(a). But when he is proposing an addition under 143(1)(a), he has to give an intimation. While under 143(1)(b), he will not give us an intimation or a proposal requiring us our opportunity of being heard. Okay. But whether he can make it? No, he cannot make it. He cannot make any adjustment even under 143(1)(b). Clear? Now come to our second example. Here the SSC filed a return of income. Is a charitable trust, claimed exemption under 11 and 12. What happened? The auditor failed to approve the return, failed to approve the form 10B. Return was approved within time, but form 10B was approved after the due date. So there was a proposal from the AO saying that since your gross receipt were more than maximum amount chargeable to tax, that is 2.5 lakh rupees, and you have not filed an audit report in the form of 10B along with the return. What it says? 12A1B says it has to be filed along with or prior to. So you have not filed it prior to or along with the return. So I am proposing that the whole gross receipt is made your total income. Though he is disallowing expenditure, but I am of the view, personal opinion, that expenditure should not be disallowed in view of decision given in the case of CIT versus Rajendra Prasad Moody, Honorable Supreme Court. But we will discuss that when we will be discussing chapters of charitable trust. Okay. But what is the issue here? That he has not approved it or approved it beyond the due date. So it would be said that he has uploaded or he has furnished the return of returning form 10B after, or report in form 10B after the due date. And there is a decision of Honorable Calcutta High Court in the case of Rai Bahadur 195 ITR 825. What it says? It said that even if the form 10B has not been filed along with the return, it is not a case of a prima facie adjustment under 143(1)(a). It says, read explanation to section 139(9). What it says? A return will be treated as defective unless all the following conditions have been satisfied. What is one of the condition? Annexure statements and columns in the return of income have been properly filled in, duly filled in, relating to computation of income. So it is an annexure to a return of income, and therefore, if assessee files it before completion of assessment, then assessing officer is bound to give the benefit and you cannot deny it. So what I am trying to press upon is that this issue was also debatable, whether form 10B is directory or mandatory. So whether 143(1)(a) can come to the rescue of the department that we will add this. The answer is big no. Why? Because it has to be an incorrect claim apparent from the records, apparent from the return or connected records. The AO saying it is connected records, na? It is appearing that you have filed after date, and the law says it has to be filed along with the return, that is before the return of income. You have not filed it, so I am proposing adjustment under 143(1)(b). But he is forgetting that it is not only these facts, but he has to apply a logic, he has to apply a legal reasoning, whether form 10B is mandatory or directory, whether it is a defect or it's a proposal for adjustment. And with CIT versus Rai Bahadur, Honorable Calcutta High Court has opined that it is an item for defect, not item for an adjustment, and defect can be cured, and defect was even cured by belated filing before completion of assessment. So it is true that it is a debatable issue. So assessing officer cannot make adjustment under 143(1). Clear? This TGI limited case we have discussed while we were discussing bullet number 1 of incorrect entry, incorrect claim. Alright, so we will not be discussing it here again. Okay, you can mark it here that we have read it with bullet number 1 above when we were discussing the definition of incorrect claim. So in this case, suppose, now take this example further, we will take this example further. Intimation came, 143(1)(a) proposal made, assessee forgot to reply, 30 days gone, intimation came. Now whether can an assessee revise it, rectify it, because it is discernible, rectify is because it is discernible from the return. Whether can assessee do it, what can assessee do it, or whether he has to file an appeal before Honorable Commissioner Income Tax appeals, or whether he has to take a reference to Honorable Commissioner Income Tax Administration under section 264. All options are open. In my opinion, best view is rectify it. Okay. And if rectification there is a problem, time limit has expired in for rectification, he can make a reference to Honorable Commissioner Income Tax under section 264. And even if there, we can file with the request for condonation, even if delay has been there and the time limit has expired. Better would be under 154, which has a 4 limit time period and which is a very big time period. In appeal, these adjustment will not be, because it is the lapse on the part of the assessee. In appeal, it will not be addressed. Had it been the case of adjustments on debatable issues, then the appellate authority recourse to appellate mechanism would have been most appropriate, rather than approaching Commissioner Income Tax under making a reference under section 264. Now this is an important case which is given in your case material as well. The first case of the chapter, and it is only an extension of the debatable issue. Okay. What happened? The company RSL Limited filed its return of income on 29 September 1994, claiming an expenditure as revenue expenditure amounting to rupees 58 lakh rupees, and the expenditure was on account of preliminary expenses on issue of share capital. What the assessee contend, it claimed 100% revenue expenditure. However, they have contend that 1/10. It was a case of, I have reduced it to 1/5 because now 1/5 is allowed. Earlier it was 1/10. So 1/5. AO said I will allow 1/5 under section 35D. So other amount is disallowed. Assessee contends before Honorable Supreme Court, Sir, Your Honor, see that this issue is debatable. Why? Because this issue has been decided by the Honorable Karnataka High Court in my favor, holding this as to be revenue expenditure. Gujarat High Court, the assessee was of Gujarat, and the Gujarat High Court has ruled against the assessee, that holding that this is a capital expenditure, so not allowed. What can be done? What can we do? Whether assessee can make an adjustment considering it a debatable issue, leave alone Brook Bonds India case that has been decided against assessee by Honorable Supreme Court, leave alone this fact. Whether this adjustment could have been made, assessee is of Gujarat and Gujarat High Court has ruled against it. Whether it is a debatable? No. Definitely AO is within its power to make an adjustment under 143(1)(a). Okay, get it? Because the issue is not debatable qua the assessee. It may be debatable with respect to Delhi, where there has been no judgment. It may be debatable with respect to any other state, where there has been no decision. But for Karnataka, it has been decided in favor of the assessee. There also AO has no power to make adjustment. Here in Gujarat, the AO has power. Assessee cannot claim it to be revenue expenditure. Now the issue was also that Honorable Supreme Court decided against the assessee. Now remember my golden rule number 2. What was the golden rule number 2? It was that the decision given by the courts relate back from the very day the law came into force. Okay, so it was there when the assessee filed the return of income. Though the decision was not there, but the decision would operate even as on the date when assessee filed the return of income. So department contended that since the law relate back to the very inception, so this adjustment should be allowed, meaning thereby adjustment should be allowed and adjustment should be made. What the assessee was contending? So this case law was not available at the time when I filed the return of income. So this adjustment was debatable as there was conflicting views of various high courts. So this adjustment cannot be made. What the Honorable Supreme Court in Raghuveer Synthetic Limited 394 ITR 1 SC held that, look, keep aside Brook Bonds case because it was given in 1997. What was the decision of Gujarat High Court when you filed the return? There was a decision in 1993 against the assessee. So can it be said that the issue was debatable qua the assessee at the time of filing your return? No. So the Honorable Supreme Court said in this judgment that even if you keep aside the case of Brook Bond India, it says the law should be applicable since the very beginning and the cause of action is still there. That is, the proceedings are pending. So this law should apply. But keep aside this proposition. Even if you take that view that the issue was debatable, even this stand is incorrect. Why? Because the Honorable Gujarat High Court has ruled against you. So there is no question of it being a debatable qua the assessee. Now something cropped into my mind. If this proposition has to be taken to its logical end, whether the issue has to be taken qua now the law has to be taken whether the issue is debatable on which date? On the date of filing of return or at the time of processing of return. Honorable Rajasthan High Court termed it that it should be taken on the date of filing of return. Though in that case the decision of Rajasthan High Court was available at the time of return of income. The only issue was that the case was not reported in any of the reportable magazines. So assessee contended that he, at the time of filing of return, he was not aware, so he cannot make that proper adjustment while computing his return. So he should that since the issue was debatable qua the assessee, in his assessee's understanding, so the no adjustment can be made. The Rajasthan High Court dismissed or brushed aside these contentions. It has to be seen. Rajasthan High Court has given a judgment, it is applicable. Whether the assessee was aware of it or not, because there is a Latin phrase which says ignorance of law is not an excuse. Not because it presupposes everybody is aware of the law, but because this excuse will be taken by all and there is no mechanism whether this excuse is a genuine excuse or a mere lame excuse to avoid a penalty. Okay. But I am of the view that even if at the time of processing of return, a jurisdictional high court gives a decision against the assessee, the learned AOCPC has the power to make those adjustments. Okay, clear? Since this proposition has not been tested in any of the court cases which came to my knowledge, so yet I am of the view, because if that view is not taken, that if we say that only at the time of return of income is taken, then the law would not be good. Why? Because if we read penalty section 270 capital A, it says no penalty is required to be levied if there is a prima facie adjustment or adjustment under section 143 1A. Okay, no penalty. And if we say that since this case law was not available on the date of filing of return, but it was available at the time of processing, the assessing officer should issue a notice under section 143.2. What will happen under 143.2? Assessee will be given an opportunity and the addition would be made, and that addition would be subject to penalty either of underreporting or misreporting. So this view has to be that any case law available at the date of processing has to be seen. It would be a different matter where a subsequent decision come, whether it will be a matter of 154 or 148. That issue we will be discussing when we will be discussing reassessment. When at the time of processing no case law has come of the jurisdictional high court or Supreme Court against the assessee. However, later on it comes, but that was within the within time period provided under 154 or 148. So what would be the recourse that can be taken by the AO? And what would be the contentions of the assessee and how to bring a bridge between the two. We will be discussing that when we will be discussing section 148 and 154. Okay. If you have any query, note it down. You can post that down in the comment box. Okay. Now, I was discussing that there is some adjustment. There is some adjustments indicated in the tax audit report, but the assessee has not carried that out while computing his return of income. Now AO says, I want those adjustments to be made. What to do? For example, under clause 20B of the form 3CD, he says, auditor says that these are the dates of the payment, actual dates of payment, these are the proposed date of payment, that is the due date by which the payment has to be made. So by taking a software, AOCPC says these 2 or 3 payments you have not paid within the due date specified in section 36(1)(va). Remember 36(1)(va), where the due date has been prescribed for employees' contribution. It has to be as per that act. 43(b) says employer's contribution, which can be before the due date of filing of return of income under section 139(1). Assessee says, since 43(b) is a non-obstante clause, so 36(1)(va) would be overridden by 43(b), and all the contribution, be it employer-employee, would be governed by 43(b), not by 36(1)(va). And they are conflicting views. So I am not considering it 143(1)(a)(2). I am considering 43(1)(a)(4). Remember, had it been 43(1)(a)(2), then debatable or non-debatable. But here it has been indicated in the audit report. Your auditor has itself said this has to be allowed, but you have not disallowed. So whether the debatable issue or debatable contention can be raised by the SSC for this particular entry as well, in my humble opinion, yes. The same principle which we have enumerated above, that the issue should not have been decided qua the SSC. If it has been decided qua the SSC by the jurisdictional high court, then he is bound. Meaning that in any other assessee's case, even if that assessment, suppose I am in Gujarat and some another assessee is also in Gujarat, in any other assessee's case, the issue has been decided by the Honorable Gujarat High Court against the SSC. So I will also be bounded, though it was not in my case, but it is binding throughout the territory. So keeping that view, keeping that analogy as well here, I am of the firm view. There is no judicial dicta as on that whether under entry 4 prima facie adjustment, anything more than, not the prima facie, because the legislature no more use the term prima facie now. The legislature uses terms incorrect claim, apparent. So whether this logic would be available in entry 4 as well, I am of the firm view that it should be there. But there is no judicial dicta as on now whether for these items debatable issues can be adjusted or not. Because AO's auditor can say, you contend before income tax authorities, it is your contention. I think that this should be disallowed. And he is not even disallowing. He is saying, I am reporting. Let the AO decide what he has to take. I am not going to take the responsibility of hiding it. Let the AO decide whether an addition has to be made or adjustment has to be made or not. These are the facts. I am disclosing only the facts. I am not given even my opinion. So in my view, since the disclosures by the auditor are mere suggestions, these are not his even views. So the analogy which we discussed in debatable issues should also apply. Okay, clear now? Somebody talked to me and said, sir, see, these debatable issues and all the issues you are talking of very old case, when the Finance Act 2016 had not amended and given the power of opportunity of being heard. Now we have opportunity of being heard. So even in debatable issues, AO has the power to make, if it only criteria has to be seen, it must be apparent from the record. If it is apparent, though it is debatable, it can be done. Because why they hold this view? Because in the earlier regime of processing of return of income, no such opportunity was provided. And while coming to this conclusion, Honorable High Courts and Supreme Court felt that this prima facie admissibility or inadmissibility has to be, prima facie admissibility or inadmissibility needs logical minds, and while taking logical mind, and opportunity has to be given, and 143(1) does not give an opportunity. So to hold 143(1) has to be constitutionally valid. Other, if the Honorable Supreme Court felt that no adjustment can be made, even though debatable, an opportunity has to be given, and the 143(1) does not envisage a mechanism where opportunity can be given, so it would have turned unconstitutional in view of the decision given by the Honorable Supreme Court in the case of Menka Gandhi, where it says these principles of natural justice are inherent, and if any law does not give those powers, it has to be given by the courts of equity. So when they hold that the provisions of 143(1) is valid, so they draw a proposition that debatable issues cannot be adjusted. Okay. Now somebody said, since this error has been rectified, now opportunity is being there. So can debatable issues for which no favorable or adverse decision is available of the jurisdictional high court, can those adjustments be made? The answer is not very certain. I would say it should be apparent and not debatable. Why? Because the window for opportunity of being heard is very limited. Okay, and it should not extend to debatable issues because it is not apparent. Though it may be incorrect, but it is not apparent. And it would be incorrect to call something which is debatable as incorrect. Okay. Something which is debatable, how can it be incorrect? It may be correct or it may not be correct. And adjustment as supposed under 143(1)(a) are short incorrect. Okay. So in my view, even after this providing those opportunity, debatable issues cannot be adjudicated under or adjusted under 143(1). Now there were some issues. Return filed, 143(1) done. Now assessee want to revise the return. Whether he can do it? Assessee is yes, but assessing officer says no, because 143(1) has been done, assessment has been completed. 139(5) says maximum up to end of the assessment year or completion of assessment, and you have completed the assessment 143(1). Then I would like to remind you the case of Rajesh Javeri and the recent case of Juari State, in which it has been held that has been held that intimation is not assessment, and therefore assessee is well within its rights to revise the return. Okay, and I get this proposition from CIT versus Himgiri Foods Private Limited, 2011, 333 ITR 508. It is a decision of Honorable Gujarat High Court. Now there is some defect in 143(1)(a). Proposal was there, I could not reply, and that proposal was on account of debatable issues. Whether I can go for 154? I am not considering the issue of 246 capital A appeal. Under 154, I can do, but because it isn't something apparent from record. But if 143(2) has been issued, no, then I cannot do, because 143(1) merges with 143(2), and while proceeding will be underway for 143(2) and 143(3), assessee would be free to agitate any point. Okay, and assessing officer would be in its right to give any claim claimed by the assessee. We will be discussing Godse India separately when we will be discussing 143(2). Okay, so excluding the effect of Godse India, he can claim. And CIT versus Udaipur Distilleries, 267 ITR 363, Rajasthan High Court, it says he cannot rectify once 143(2) has been issued. Now, an important recent decision of Vodafone Idea Limited case. This is very important. This is not something a new proposition. It is a reiteration of an old proposition in new words. Okay. Assessee filed the return of income. I have adjusted the figures considering the scenario. It was an old case. Return of income was filed for AY 1819 on 23rd September 2018, claiming refund. Notice under section 143(2) was issued on 30th September 2019. Okay. So, what is the time limit of processing of return under section 143(1)? Return was filed on 23rd September 2018, 1 year from the end of the assessment year, which comes out to be 31st March 2020. So, as per second proviso of 143(1), the processing has to be completed by 31st March 2020. And what is the time limit for completion of assessment under section 143(3)? The time limit can be completed under section 143(3) It is 30th September 2020. However, the return was processed under section 143(1) on 9th April 2020. That is after 31st March 2020. And the order under section 241 capital A was passed by the learned AO after taking the previous approval of the principal commissioner or commissioner by recording the reasons on 14th March 2020. So the Vodafone Idea Limited says, sir, section 143(1)D is no more in the statute books. So that what was 143(1)D? That there shall not be any, it shall not be necessary for the AO to process the return of income if notice under section 143(2) has been issued, and this provision has been done away with by the proviso. So now the processing has to be done with respect to 143(1), which is 1 year from the end of the assessment year, and that was 31st March. And since the assessing officer has not done it, so the acknowledgement of the return should be treated as intimation. And when it will be an intimation, so as per section 143(1)D, the refund should be determined and it should be issued to the SSE. And what the department was saying? Department was saying, since 143(2) has been issued, the effect of omission of 143(1)D is only that there is no time limit as to processing. He has to process the return, but it is not. It only does away with the time limit. And if assessing officer has to process it, he can, for reasons recorded, take the previous approval of the principal commissioner under 241 capital A and deny the refund, saying that for these reasons we have processed your return, but we have withheld your refund. Okay. So what did the Honorable Supreme Court says? That the processing of return under subsection 1 of section 143 must wait the further exercise of power of scrutiny assessment under section 143(2) and 3. If the power under section 143(2) is initiated in a manner known to law, there cannot be any insistence that the processing under section 143(1) be completed and refund be determined before scrutiny under section 143(2) is over. So what the Honorable Supreme Court says, whatever may be the contentions or the arguments of the Vodafone, refund cannot be determined when there has been a valid order of under section 241 capital A, and that valid order under 241 capital A was served upon the SSE within the time limit prescribed under second proviso. That is, it was served before 31st March 2020 as it was served on 14th March 2020. So as it was issued to the SSE, though the formal intimation under section 143(1) was issued after the time limit prescribed, there is no error committed on the part of the assessing officer. So the recording of that reasons, approval and that communication within the time limit prescribed under the second proviso of 143(1) was held to be valid. And Vodafone cannot claim that the acknowledgement has become the processing of return and refund be issued. The argument of the SSE that the Tata Teleservices case has to be taken. No, the Honorable Supreme Court said no, it is not right. Because in Tata Teleservices 143(1)D was available on the statute book, there was no proviso and the discretion was available. Here the discretion has been exercised under section 241 capital A and the discretion has been properly communicated. and has been statutorily backed. So, following its decision of CI in the case of CIT versus Gujarat Electricity Board, it says assessing officer is not bound to process the return of income. Okay. Now this was all about 143(1). Now we will recapitulate. Okay. If you have any query, you can post in the comment box. Okay, I will reply it. Now now we will recapitulate it. Change in the status of assessee, whether allowed under 143(1), not allowed. On debatable issues, not allowed. Debatable issue has to be seen for the jurisdiction of the assessee. Assessee is within Gujarat and Gujarat High Court has given a decision. It is not debatable for the assessee. Disallowance indicated in audit report can be made unless it is on a debatable issue. Whether revision can be made? Yes. Whether activation can be made? Yes. Whether a reference can be made to a commissioner? Yes. However, respective time limit has to be adhered to. Whether activation of intimation is possible post issuance of notice under section 143(2), the answer is no. Okay. Whether adjustments made under section 143(1)(a) is appealable. If assessee has received an intimation, it is an appealable. Mere proposal is not appealable. Okay. And if processing of return under section 143(1) has not been completed within 1 year and notice under section 143(2) has already been issued and the time limit for completion of assessment under section 143(3) has not been expired, so whether the return would be treated as acknowledgement, whether the acknowledgement will be treated as return, whether the acknowledgement will be treated as processing of return and intimation and refund will be determined under 143(1)(d), the answer is no, provided the assessing officer has recorded the reasons, take the proviso approval and communicated the assessee within the time limit prescribed under second proviso or to section 143(1). That is Vodafone Idea Limited case. Okay. So we have now recapitulated everything. If you have any query, you can post in the comment box. If you want to suggest any improvement, you can suggest in the comment box. If you want I should take any other chapter first, you can suggest in the comment box. But do not forget to like, subscribe, share and press the bell icon. Thank you.